Got to show them how it's done, how to snap out of it. To do it correctly, you need one of those big fat red ones, though. You wrap it around. Better yet is wait until you're playing psychiatrist and you got somebody come in your office and you put it around their head and just say, "Here's your problem, snap out of it." We're delighted to see all you TV viewers back after the few nights that we had of technical difficulties. As you noticed, we were replaced by several educational films. But the difficulty is over and we're back on the air, and I'd like to welcome you again to the show New Intelligence, the show whose motto is, hey, I didn't know you were going to take it seriously. All right, here we go. God almighty. See, ever since I mentioned it, now you people started requesting page 1 and 2. And Kyroot said, the future rules the world, but the past writes the headlines. Somebody just wanted to hear that one over because I know you all understand that one. See, it's the gradual build-up. It's the kind of thing I learned from Wagner. Of course, not really. Wagner's attitude was, well, you start slow and then you build up slow. And then of course, the climactic moment comes. Of course, with Wagner, it's never come yet. So. You wait. Then Kyroot offered this fiscal fine point. What a man ordinarily thinks is his disposable income. Inasmuch as this page 3, I'm tempted to pass that by because it should be obvious. One of the great hobbies in the ordinary world is, you should know, we don't have to pick on those who are part of the great commercial rat race because the rat race is part of your own nervous system. It is like a hobby outgrowth to the needs and the hungers of the primary system. And it comes out, which makes it easy for ordinary social critics and smart alecks to stick out their tongue, especially when they're not succeeding out in life, to stick their tongue out at others and accuse them of being grasping, greedy, probably real beady-eyed people who want to make a lot of money, who want to be real profitable, who want to make a profit off of you, in fact. That's easy to attack those people. But the basis of it is the fact that no matter how you cut it, take it outside of religion and any kind of moral platitudes that the gods or the balance of the humane universe doesn't like people who are greedy. Hell, it loves people who are greedy. Look around. Mountains swallow whole pebbles and never mention, just never even notice it. Volcanoes will take water droplets, all they can get their hands on, turn it into steam. So there is underlying throughout man's culture, and people will agree to it, that something smells if you fall too far into the hands of greed, desire for profit, storing up treasures. But the basis of it is not at the primary level, because at the primary level you would not find the nervous system, you would not find the being, the essence of any creature being able to involve itself in greed. God, was that a mouthful? In other words, if we were humans without the nervous system up to this level, go back and play like we're baboons, we're elephants. Please note, elephants, hippos, dogs do not take food and put it away. They eat. They get through eating, they walk off. They sleep. They do not fix up a place and put up a little sign, Fido sleeps here, keep out. There is no such thing possible as greed, in the full sense of the word, at the primary level. It just does not exist. You do what is necessary at that level. So greed is a hobby. Greed is an offshoot of course, primary affairs like everything else. It did not spring from just nowhere. And I'm sure that there could be even some psychological mention somewhere. If not, I'll do it now. Any ordinary person could say this if they hadn't already, that inordinate greed, kinds of people that they periodically go to their homes after they have died, some recluse, and they find their house is stacked full of empty Coca-Cola cans, newspapers, things they've got no need for, and I'm sure that they refer to it, they probably got some kind of, they've changed it into Latin, some kind of rat pack psychological or psychosis. And somebody, even an ordinary person, could say, well, I bet you somewhere, of course they'd fall into this, that somewhere in their childhood they never had enough toys, or they never had enough to eat, they grew up in a poor environment, and now they're trying to compensate. Now, of course, all they're saying, they're trying to look for a reason. Now, they believe that the dance started somewhere and that somebody is going to figure out where it started and when these people get here. That's what all that is, and nobody knows. The fact is, I have just revealed it to you, that there is some validity to that, but don't look for a reason that the person does it, because everything that people do in the secondary world is simply a hobby version of something that was primary. In other words, greed, hoarding stuff would be like an offshoot of wanting to eat. That if indeed a wolf, which does not put away food, if indeed a wolf could suddenly begin to think in some way resembling a human, then I would suggest to you that he might start putting away food. But he never had before. Things had not changed. He still has the same likelihood of finding food and living, etc. But once you begin to think, you got to have a hobby. And see, that your mind would sound like probably a Pink Floyd record played over and over and over and over and over the rest of your life. So you got to think about something. So what do you think about? You can't think of an imaginary animal. I know you think you can, but you can't. So you got to think about stuff that has some validity. So all hobbies, all psychosis started out as something else. All neuroses. Everything that the mind thinks started out as something real. So, the whole kind of cultural, psychological, spiritual, moralistic attack on people being greedy, taking more than their share, spills over into what Kyroot is talking about when he says that what a man ordinarily thinks is his only disposable income. That is, the only area that a rebel would have that he could find fault with what he does, not because, well, I have 24,000 CDs. Or if you're a woman, I guess I have, 1,672 dresses. And I don't even have that many days left probably to live. I'll never get them worn. That doesn't matter. See, that's just a hobby. The only thing that would be a serious breach of some sort of deadly sin, in quotation marks, to a rebel, would be that he is greedy in the mind. That what he should be his disposable income, that which he should not hoard, that which he should not protect, that which has no profit, is what he ordinarily thinks. That he can squander, and which is just the opposite from everybody else. Everybody else, they think, no. Take away my good reputation, but don't you touch my closet. Don't you touch my book collection. All of that can go. This is disposable to a rebel. That, of course, his ordinary collection. That's the library that he's picked up out in life. That can go. I know you think it can't. And if you're ordinary, it can, or you'd be crazy. But if you're not ordinary, it can go, and you're not crazy. Contrary, you feel like, Jesus, I just lost about 40 or 50 pounds of ugly fat that I didn't know I had. Which is an old joke. How'd you do that? I coughed my head. There's a worse version, but I won't go into it. And Kyroot said on page 12, man's mental sport is like small arms competition. Some minds are in charge of shooting, other minds in charge of the recoiling. At least any civilian be watching this that was expecting part 2 of the nude homeowners refresher film. Rather than say that some minds are in charge of shooting, if you followed the allegory, the parable, the paradigm of this being that man's mental life being sort of a form of small arms competition, firing range, and that some minds are in charge of the shooting and some in charge of the recoiling. Then if you followed into that, you could take a ordinary view and say, well, yes, that's true. Some minds are actually in charge of thinking, and other minds are just in charge of sort of naysaying, non-thinkers. Yeah, that's like some people got tickets to the Olympics and some don't. That don't matter. They're all in Barcelona. So then you got to figure, if that means anything, it's got to mean something to me. And if it means something to me, what the hell do I care what other people think? So then it turns into what? Turns into this. One mind. One small arms competition one brain. Several parts, one brain. Parts of it are in charge of the actual shooting, and parts of it in charge of the recoiling. Don't stand behind the man with the bazooka. But see, when you think ordinarily, you do stand behind the man with the bazooka. Those of you who've never been in the service, you only do that once, by the way, which makes it's not a perfect parable, because you'll only do that one time in the physical world. With your brain, though, you'll stand behind yourself and you'll try to shoot, and the damn recoil hits you. You do it to yourself. It comes out in such forms as, live and learn, guilt, chagrin, oh my God, what have I done? Or wait a minute, don't ask me, check with history. Relieving yourself of the blame. Because if this part, the ordinary mind, fires, there's a recoil. I'm assuming all of you don't have to be gun aficionados, understand that even Professor Newton, Dr. Newton, even though he may not have been interested in the sport of ammo, reloading, when you fire a weapon, there is the law of motion takes over as part of it, that there will be an opposite reaction. That's known as the recoil every time you fire. Every time you think, your mind recoils. It has to. It would blow up. The whole thing about a bazooka, on your shoulder, those of you who don't know, don't stand behind it. The point is, it fires this way. And you think, boy, I'm glad I'm not in front of this guy. But if you're staying behind him, you're not going to be in real good shape. I hope you don't have any good clothes when that happens. And then if you thought, well, wait a minute, I'll make a fortune off the Army, off the services. I know how to cure that. They got to keep teaching people to stay out of the way. Hell, put a plug on the end of it, and then I assume you can figure out. It's like sticking your finger in the barrel of a pistol, that kind of thing. It is going to grossly interfere with the normal workings of the mechanism. So you could say, well, I will stop my mind from recoiling. At the ordinary level, if you stop that, you got an explosion. But now, if we're talking about a kind of small arms competition for somebody who has some idea what they're doing, you got to understand that, wait a minute, anytime I think, anytime that my mind is shooting, and at the same time it is recoiling, which is natural, then I'm not thinking good. In other words, I am thinking naturally. We got down all the shtick by now that a fake smile means, well, so much for that. Maybe I've got Tourette's. Worse yet, maybe I am Tourette. And Kyroot said, when the ship is sinking for sure, it's surprising how many people admit they can't swim. I'm like some of you, I'm sure, that don't you just love these kind, because you could take it at least two ways right off the bat, and both of them suck. I mean, both of them are just terrible. All right, terrible. But see that, or both of them are wonderful. Or maybe it makes no sense. Maybe that's it. When the ship is sinking for sure is underlined here, not fake sinking, because everybody's always saying, hey, the ship's sinking. You get up in the morning, you go downstairs and you see a gray hair and you think the ship's sinking. And if not that, you go to eat down at the omelet shop and you look down your omelet and you see a hair. You think, ugh! You think the ship is sinking. Well, boy, isn't it nice to laugh at other people like, well, how could somebody's day be ruined because they found a gray hair? Right. I'm glad I'm not talking to dumbasses like that. So you can say, well, that's fake sinking. That is just crying. That kid that hollered wolf, that was just because he was on dry land. They're hollering, iceberg, iceberg. But this one is saying the ship is sinking for sure. And so we'll assume in the little Kyroot story, picture, that the people know it. They know this time it's no fake. The ship is sinking. And then he says, it's surprising how many people will admit they can't swim. I'm with you still. This either makes a whole lot of sense, it makes no sense, it makes two or three kinds of sense. Because if the ship's sinking for sure, why would it be surprising for people to say they can't swim? Those who can't swim, they would surely be running around hollering, may I get on the boat first? I can't swim. Surely some of you people can swim. And I guess some real men, some bricklayers, maybe some guys from Alabama that had a few drinks, go, oh, sure, we can swim.
So what would be surprising that some people who couldn't swim say so? But I still agree with you, it even gets worse. Because it says it's surprising how many people not will say, not will claim, not will scream. It's surprising how many people will admit they can't swim. Which, if anyone was trying to make any sense out of this, then you go back to, well, wait a minute. If the ship is sinking for sure, and it takes that kind of situation for these people to admit, whatever the hell that means, to admit they can't swim, then that means at the times when the ship's not sinking, people will fake it. People will say like, hell, I can swim. I can walk on water. I'll never drown. Yeah, I agree with you. It makes no sense whatsoever. I'm glad that we deconstructed it and realized it makes no sense whatsoever. I'm glad it was a short one so we can go into one that perhaps has more of a metaphysical, spiritual promise to it. Well, I guess we shouldn't be surprised this one was asked for, since even when I heard it. And Kyroot said, a one-eyed man is as good as a two-eyed one, semicolon. Because regular 3D reality looks only slightly flatter to him that does ordinary sight. That's a big consolation, which is what some of the rest of it is, or goes on. But think about it. If you were faced with being a one-eyed man, and it points out it's not that much worse. Ordinary things are only ordinary life is going to only look slightly flatter. And a fellow thinks, well, it's exactly that kind of information that makes an everyday person want to rip off their clothes, run out in the yard, and holler, hooray, hooray. And the very last part, see, says a rebel, I told you there's some things you shouldn't even mention to ordinary people. I guess I start to say that maybe it's kind of things, what he was saying, the kind of things you shouldn't think about. Well, no, I guess if Kyroot meant that, he'd have said. Now, it says quite plainly, see, says a rebel, I told you there's some things that you should never even mention to ordinary people. It doesn't say anything about there's certain things you shouldn't think about to yourself. So I'm sorry, I guess I was reading too much, because he could have said that if he'd wanted to. There were several in here that it's not important, but the preface, the setup to them was about bad news that Kyroot brought. There were three of them. This was the middle one. This was after the bad news of one that we've already gone past. But this is a little later. Kyroot was forced to break some disturbing scientific news. The earlier was just kind of bad news. But this is distressing scientific news. In some parts of even the civilized world, snowflakes continue to pass for snowflakes. I don't know whether we just picked a bad night and that none of this makes any sense, but I agree with many of you that I guess you can say the sentence makes sense, but my God, what the hell could it mean? Why would somebody even point out? Why would they say that something could continue to pass for what it is? And it even points out, especially in the civilized world, not in some nutty place. Not down in the grave with Lewis Carroll or somebody, but in the civilized world, even the civilized world. And it almost says, it looked like it first said especially, and he marked it out, redid it, even the civilized world. All right, where else but in the civilized world would there be any question of what something is passing for itself? And in fact, if we're going this far, the more civilized it is, the more someone has to stand up. They do not, of course, do it this straightforwardly, or else it would be put away. But the more civilized something is, the more the secondary world is apparently the raison d'etre, the motivating force of the people,
the more there has to be spokesmen standing up and in some way being apologists for things being what they are. No? All right, if you're at the primary world, if we could have it both ways, we can talk about it. If we could take the primary, the animal part, the uncivilized, the non-speaking part of man, and it could operate and we could look at it and still have our minds so that we could look at it, would there ever be an explanation at that level about why something is what it is? Can you imagine an eagle as it takes its last flight and crashing to earth, having dreams about all the money that his kinfolks borrowed from him and never paid him back? Or can you imagine it whining about any matter about justice? Or maybe it's whining, maybe it got shot and it's thinking, I got tricked. Things are what they are. There's nothing to be said. But the more that there is something to be said, which is the secondary world, the more that there is something to be said, the more that must be said. And it gets to the more and more civilized point, the more that must be said explaining why things are what they are. I've almost made it make sense. In some parts of even the civilized world, snowflakes continue to pass for snowflakes. So you can say, well, what else are they going to pass for? What kind of dumbass comment is it? What do you call, if we want to really save time, I can just say all human speech. That kind of like standing in a blinding snowstorm wearing white sunglasses. You can't figure out what the hell's going on. So let's narrow it down. How about pick on our good old friend religion, morality. What is it? What is religion except apologizing for snowflakes being snowflakes? That's not what they call it. They have to kind of turn it around a little bit or you wouldn't get the benefit from it if you're ordinary. But it is a continuing piece of scientific news on the basis of a kind of apology of pointing out how blank continues to pass for blank. And when they do it, and I say they, it's their nervous system dancing with yours, there's nobody doing it to you. When it's done that way, then you feel guilty about the fact that it's snowing. Try it again. The disconcerting scientific news in some parts of even the civilized world, snowflakes continue to pass for snowflakes. It's shocking, it is disturbing, something must be done about it. You know, of course, all right-thinking, moral, decent people are doing all they can. But you know, what can one person or even a few million people do against the forces of nature, weather? I mean, it snows and you can go out there and you can pray, you can dance. You can dress up like somebody funny. And if it wants to snow, it's going to snow. And if you don't like snow, how about other things like bad luck, death? But snowflakes pass for snowflakes. And the more that's true, the more somebody must comment on it. That was the bad news from Kyroot. From everybody else, it's not bad news. For everybody else, it's just a prologue to, well, now we'll take a break and the ushers will pass among you, and please contribute all you can. Conversation. Never dance with a random occurrence. Another guy. But who else can you dance with? First guy. Well, nobody, I guess, but at least don't take it seriously. It's back to, from many different directions, but one is back to a comment about these hormones invite one another to dance. And after that, you know, it's the brain that's got to make chit-chat. In other words, the primary world is the one that runs up on each other. And it doesn't take long to run up on each other in a primary sense. And after that, what are you going to do? You stand there and look at each other. And the brain has to say, well, you know, you got a light? What's your sign? Have we ever been to bed together before? You got to talk about something. So the conversation there is never dance with a random occurrence. And you could take that in a sensual, erotic manner, such as I was kind of inferring there, back to a primary occurrence of sex, but it does not simply have to be that. Never dance with a random occurrence. How about this? Never dance with being a carpenter. Oh, you're a carpenter? Yes. How'd you become a carpenter? Well, it's interesting you should ask. It's not interesting, but the man's mouth is moving. His past a primary concern, and the mind's the one who's got to smoke. How did you happen to become a Presbyterian? That's an interesting story. I'll be glad to tell you. How did you end up here in a lifeboat in the middle of the ocean? Ah, therein lies the tale, my friend. The first guy says, never dance with a random occurrence. We can be crude since we've got 6 minutes. This is not true. Of course, you people know it, but I'm just going to say it because we're running out of time. At the ordinary level, every dance you do is a random occurrence. I know it's not true. I mean, it's some kind of metaphor, and I don't even know what the hell that means, but every dance you do. Yes, I am married to a fine, short, big-boned, red-headed woman. I live in the northeastern corridor, and I am a professional man. I work in an office, and I am a Lutheran. Now, we'll assume that's a nice, sane, serious person who makes all this possible. As those two band members were talking on break, remember? One of them said, serious people can give you serious problems. The other one said, yeah, but if it wasn't for serious people, we would be in serious trouble. So we'll assume we're not making fun of this man. But he has danced. Remember, this is not true. But he is dancing with random occurrences. Certainly, if you ask him, well, how in the world did you end up living in a pissant state like Delaware and work for a chintzy company like this and become a Lutheran? How'd you do that? Hold on there, sir. This is no simple accident. You make it sound like that I walked out one day and I tripped and I fell in a cesspool. I picked all this out. Yeah. Remember, I'm just making this up and it's not true. The conversation, never dance with a random occurrence. And this other guy, not only am I making this up, I don't know who made up this conversation. Oh, Kyroot. Another guy says, but who else can you dance with? And he said, well, nobody, I guess, but at least don't take it seriously. I don't think we should go on with that at all. When we had some visitors, I apologize to you people out in cable land, but we had some young visitors here, there's several people here today that I'm sure couldn't be over 50. And I see they're getting nervous. So I don't think we should pursue that. And Kyroot said, emotions are the twin blade propellers that drive the human vessel. They keep the ship adequately balanced for routine voyages, but try your best and keep your fingers out of their way. I guess if we're somewhere like Delaware that had some kind of chintzy state poetry contest, you could say, well, boy, that sounds kind of poetic. God forbid I speak for Kyroot. But how about human emotions are absolutely necessary, and they are twin-bladed. In case you don't know, you can get into additional blades. If you don't know, you can balance 3 blades on a propeller. But a propeller has got to be balanced for efficiency. It'll finally tear apart if you've got a 2-blade propeller. It was, if there was the center, they got to be balanced. I mean, you simply understand that having to do with centrifugal force. The propeller that drives the ordinary vessel of man, the ordinary limbic internal system of man, is 2-bladed. We've been through all that. It just is. That's all you need. And it is adequate to keep it balanced and get you through life of being half the time depressed, consider that 1 blade or any synonym you like for depressed, being sad, melancholy, vexed, perplexed. But on the other hand, you've got the balance that, every now and then, I don't know, some days I feel so good, I put the gun away. Well, in other words, into each life is a little rain, and into each life is a little sunshine, right? That is the adequate. And Kyroot was pushing a little bit adequate. It's more than adequate, but that is what keeps ordinary people balanced. And when it gets to be too unbalanced is when they're considered to be literally unbalanced. That somebody, if they get into the area of one of the blades, you consider the downtime, the downside of the limbic system, of the actual feelings, the hormones with the limbic system, to use, it's not all it is, but to use just everyday anatomical terms, the sensations of the body that then go into secondary and gets translated into ideas and descriptions and laid on other people. It's two-bladed. And it's a kind of balance, and of course it's not necessarily 50-50, but it's balanced enough for an average person that about half their life seems to be downside, and about half of it, all right. Happiness and unhappiness. And if it gets too far one way, the blade is out of balance and you're not stabilized, and you will indeed be adjudicated unbalanced. You become, neurotic, psychotic. It is adequate, perfectly adequate, for ordinary voyage. It'll get you through 60 or 70 years. If it stays just balanced in the ordinary sense, you can say, well, a large part of my life has just been sorrow, one death after another, heartbreak, all kinds of disappointment. But if you made it through 60 or 70 years and they didn't put you away, and you're not on heavy sedation constantly, then your blade, the propeller, was balanced enough to get you through an ordinary voyage, which is an ordinary man's 60 or 70 years. But Kyroot points out, although that's true, remember we're talking about human emotions. Now, we're not talking about just the limbic system, the sensations of the body. We're talking about emotions, which are on this planet unique with man. That the emotions are what keeps a man stabilized, apparently, for an adequate voyage, for a reasonable voyage of 60 or 70 years. But then the tail end of the Kyroot is talking to somebody else. It says, but do try and keep your fingers out of their way. Huh? How about, I refer you back to one that nobody asked for. The Kyroot said, people's hormones will drive you crazy. Are we out? Bye. Good night. Tune in again next week for the return nudist on parade.